Welcome to video 22. In the last video, we built out the cart page, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that off my to-do list. However, we do have some more work to do on the actual cart functionality. Before we can get to working on actually displaying the products in the cart, we need a way to add and remove products from the cart. So in this particular video, I'm going to be talking about how to add items to the cart. If I go over to the site, you'll notice I do have add to cart buttons, and if you look down here in the bottom left hand corner, the URLs that these buttons point to are cart.php $ID equals and then the product ID. So this product happens to be ID 1, this one's ID 3, this one ID 6, etc. So we have the actual URL structure in place to be able to add items to the cart, but we need a cart object. So we're going to be working primarily with m_cart.php today within the models folder. And I'll start it out as I usually do with a comment. This is going to be my cart class, and it's going to handle all tasks related to showing or modifying the number of items in the cart. And in addition, I'm going to add some additional information here. We're going to be tracking items in the cart using a session variable. And let me do a brief comment and explain this as we go. So at the top of this file, I'm going to also include, I'm going to say the cart keeps track of user selected items using a session variable. And that session variable is session cart. And this particular session variable is going to hold an array. And it contains the IDs and the number of selected items of the products in the cart. And this variable looks like this. Cart, and then the second key here is the product ID. So for example, if I go back to Chrome here, say I add beach toys to the cart, my session variable is going to look like this. Session cart, and then it's going to have a 1 because that's the ID of the product, and then assuming we added one of that item, it's going to look like this. So hopefully that'll explain the direction that I'm headed. So as usual with all my objects, I'm going to create class cart, and I'll start with my constructor. See, like so, and it's just going to be an empty constructor. We don't need it to do anything. Then I'll add a couple line breaks. This is going to be my getters and setters section. And we're going to be working on the add function, which let me actually do the documentation properly. This is going to be adds item to the cart, and it's going to be public parameters. It's going to accept an ID, or specifically it'll be an int ID and an int number of items that we want to add, and then it returns null. So public function add, and the first variable here, the first argument is going to be an ID The second one is going to be num. This num represents the number of this particular item that we want to add to the cart, and in this case we're going to set the default to 1. So within this add function, the first thing we want to do is we need to set up or retrieve the cart. So I'm going to create a cart variable. It's going to equal a blank array. And we're going to check if the session variable is set. If is set. And if the session variable is already set, meaning there is an item already in the cart, we're going to set the cart variable to session. Like this. And the next thing we want to do, now that we have the cart variable set up, this is going to contain the items in the cart. We want to check. We want to check to see if this particular item that we're wanting to add is already in the cart. And to do that, we do if is set cart. And we're going to look specifically for the cart at the ID spot. And if the item is in the cart, we want to add to it. So we're going to do cart ID equals cart ID plus num. So just to recap what I've gone over so far, we're creating an add method within our object. This add method has 2 arguments. It has an ID, which is the ID of the item that we want added to the cart, and it has a number, which is the number of that particular item that we want added to the cart. So the first thing that we do is we set up and retrieve the cart variable if it exists. If it doesn't exist for some reason, it's simply a blank array. Then we check to see if the item is already in the cart, and if so, we simply add to it. And the next step, so if it's not already set, else, then we want to set cart ID equals num, and then we're going to set our session variable. Session cart equals cart. So at the end of this method, we've created a temporary cart object, we've added items to it, and then we've set the session back to that cart. And this allows us to easily add items to the cart, and we're going to be using this session variable in multiple places so we can update the number of items in the cart and remove items from the cart. So let's actually test this in practice. Probably the easiest way for me to do this, since we have the URL structure in place already, so I'm going to go over to my cart.php. And up here at the top, we're going to do a check to see if an item is trying to be added to the cart. So we're going to do if is set get ID. And we also want to make sure that this particular ID variable is numeric. So is numeric get ID. The first step in this process would be to check to make sure we're adding a valid item. So let's say make sure like that. We're going to skip this step for now. I need to double check. I believe we need to make one modification to our products object for us to be able to have this functionality working. But the next thing, we're going to actually add the item to the cart. And to do that, we're going to check to see if we're adding more than one item at a time. And by default, all of our add to cart buttons simply add one of this specific item to the cart, but we could potentially have more items added at one time. So we're going to do if is set get num. And similar thing, we're going to make sure that that's a numeric number. And if so, we're going to do cart add, and we're going to get the ID. And then we're going to also pass in get num, like so. And then we're going to add an alert. So template set alert, and we're going to indicate that items have been added to the cart. And if we're just simply adding one item to the cart, so else, then we're going to do cart add, and we're only going to pass in get ID. We're going to do the same thing, set the alert, but rather than items, we're just only adding one, so item has been added to the cart. And after all of this process, assuming we added an item to the cart successfully, we're going to go ahead and display that session variable just so you can see that in action. So I'm going to do an echo pre, echo closing pre, then in between that print R of session cart, like so. And the last thing that we can do before we test this is I need to go to my init.php. We need to include our cart, so mcart.php, and then we also need to create the object. Just so you can see this a little bit better, cart equals new cart, like so. So let's go ahead and test this, see if we have any bugs in the code, any misspellings, that sort of thing. So I'm going to add the Beach Toys item to the cart, and you'll notice we now have an array in place. The product with an ID of 1 has one item in the cart, and you'll notice we have an alert item has been added to the cart. So keep in mind, this particular line, remember, that's still static. That's not actually being pulled from our cart. But to see this again, say we do add to cart here, you'll notice we now have a new product in the cart with an ID of 6, and that has 1. And as a last example, say we add another Beach Toys item to the cart, add to cart, and you'll notice the product with an ID of 1 now has a 2 of that particular item within the cart. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking about how to clear the cart, and we're going to keep on working through the process until we can actually dynamically generate these rows that are in the cart and actually be able to pass in this product information along to PayPal.